Hey, this is Mark Morton from Lamb of God, and we are here with Revolver talking about the Lamb of God discography.
Pray for resolve. Pray for a savior.
So, the premise for this is that I guess a year ago, Revolver put out a list top to bottom of the best to worst Lamb of God albums. I don't remember Revolver's list. I do remember that I chimed in on the flaming cesspool that is my Twitter account. And I chimed in and said, that list is wrong. I've been asked to put together my list, favorite to least favorite Lamb of God albums. I would like to add the disclaimer that we could have done this interview tomorrow and my list might have looked different. We won't talk about Omens, the new album coming out, because I don't think it's fair to include that in this as a place on the list when your viewership, when your readership cannot listen to it to agree or disagree. My least favorite currently today of the 8 released Lamb of God studio albums is Storm and Drang. I can tell you without going into too much detail that the band itself was in a point of kind of just tension within the band, personal relationships on multiple levels and in multiple angles were strained. It was just a really kind of tumultuous period, I think, for many of us, certainly for me personally. I don't want to speak for too many people, but for me personally, a time of conflict and personal struggle and just kind of turmoil and chaos, and it's just kind of dark personal stuff. And I think while I certainly wrote a lot of material for that record, the relationship I had with that material was not particularly enriched. I just wasn't really that connected to my artistry and to the process of writing and recording a record. I think there are some good songs on that record. Embers is a great song, and one I'm particularly close to, and Chino's so great on that. Certainly some high points on the record. But for me personally, knowing the time frame that happened in, knowing the things that were going on, for me personally, and then kind of within the context of the inner workings of the band, it's just not really a high point for me. In fact, I would say it's a low point. The second shittiest Lamb of God record, in my humble opinion, would be Resolution. Actually, interestingly, I didn't realize this even when I made the list, but this was the one right before Storm and Drang. So the reason why Resolution I have so low on my list of 7 out of 8 is, again, a pretty rough time for me. I've been pretty open about my personal life and my issues with addiction, drug addiction, and alcoholism. I'm open and wide open book on that. I'm firmly and in long-term recovery now, and I'm open about that as well, and it's a wonderful thing. But I wasn't then, and it was just a shitty time for me, man. I was really struggling with that kind of stuff, and there's great work on this, and I contributed music and lyrics, and I'm really, really proud of it. It was also a very dark period for me, so I just don't have like a warm, cozy, like super lovey feeling about stuff that was going on then. This album happened to come in. That said, on a purely kind of technical or just like critical standpoint on the record, it's just too long. If we had left like 4 songs off this record, because I think there's like 14 songs on it, if we had left 4 songs off this record, this would shoot up the list probably 3 or 4 spots. It's just very, very weighed down with filler, so what wound up being filler songs. And the reason they're there, I don't mind saying, is because different people were fighting for different songs for whatever reason. So it's just too long. It's not properly edited in terms of what songs made it and what songs didn't. My number 6 on the list, so would be the third shittiest Lamb of God record, is New American Gospel. Now this one, tricky. I don't want to discount the role this record played in establishing the band, establishing us as a new band, establishing us as part of this new wave of the American heavy metal scene that was coming together when we made this record and when it came out. Me putting it this low on this list is in spite of all of the great things that this record did for us, the doors it opened for us, and the part of the learning process that it was for us. In spite of all of that, which is all monumental, the record sounds terrible. It's pretty much unlistenable. Just the songwriting across the board, it's got some great riffs on it. The technical execution that Willie and I that's captured of us on the record could have been better. We were still getting our feet under us in terms of being like less of a punk rock band and more of a tightened up kind of, you know, solid metal band. All of this is growing pains. I don't have any problem with all this. It's just if we're going to put it on a list, what it boils down to, honestly, more than anything, is the record sounds like shit. We all had to learn to make a record, to make an album together as a band, and we just hadn't learned it yet. And we didn't have a lot of resources. And I think everybody involved in the entire process of making that record was kind of on a learning curve. So, you know, it doesn't hold up sonically, even to the album that came after it. The fourth shittiest Lamb of God album, Sacrament.
This is a motherfucking invitation. The only one you could ever.
It has a couple of our biggest, greatest songs on it, but I think top to bottom, it's inconsistent. I think for it to be the great album everyone says it is, it's gotta be that top to bottom. We're talking about albums. We're not talking about the top 10 greatest Lamb of God songs. We're talking about the top 10 greatest Lamb of God albums. And while Sacrament might be the album most of your readers discovered Lamb of God on, or maybe it's the album after they discovered Lamb of God on, and maybe Redneck was everyone's favorite song of the 2000 aughts. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe everyone loved the birthday party video. I did too. But we're going to talk about albums. This is not the greatest Lamb of God album because it is inconsistent. And for every great song, there's a song you kind of just want to skip over. For me, we're talking about my opinion. Okay, so now we're getting over the hump. So now we're in the top half. The fourth best is Rap. This was my problem. This is why we're here. We're talking about a fucking album. We're not talking about what album is your favorite Lamb of God song on. Chances are your favorite Lamb of God song is on either Ashes of the Wake or Sacrament, which is why everyone puts that on the top of the damn list. But we're talking about a fucking album. Wrath is a solid album, top to bottom. I defy anyone to listen to that album start to finish. In fact, I am of the opinion that if that's the sole evaluating factor, listenability from track one to the end, Wrath is probably the best. It's the most consistent album, top to bottom. It's the one you listen to all the way through, and every song is good. And it sounds great. Josh Wilbur is always a phenomenal engineer, always a phenomenal mix, always a phenomenal producer. Love Josh, but that album is on fire. It sounds great. It was his first production, so he had a lot to prove in his own mind. In fact, Josh is, a really close friend of mine. We talk all the time, and he's told me many times he apparently lost like 15 pounds making this record because he was so scared. And he's not a big guy by any stretch. He was just so scared of screwing up or what he just couldn't eat. He was nervous the whole time. So I just think Wrath, man, it just sounds great. And I think it's incredibly consistent top to bottom. And I think, and this is like a weird way of quantifying something, but I think this album has aged better. You can listen to Wrath right now and it doesn't sound dated. Where if you listen to Sacrament or Ashes of the Wake, you're back in the aughts. You're drinking Jägermeister with a white belt on. Top three, my number three Lamb of God record would be Selftitled.
A universe in the palm of your hand, the artifice of it.
It answered a lot of questions about the band. It answered any questions people might have about whether or not we could survive a member change. It answered a lot of questions about whether or not we were still motivated about our songwriting. It answered a lot of questions about our ability to continue and our sustainability and our longevity as a band. And I think it does the same thing that Wrath does, where you can really, really listen to this. We're talking about albums now. We're talking about albums. And you can listen to this album top to bottom. And when you're done, you feel like it was a established, defined album, top to bottom. And again, it also has one of the biggest songs of the modern era of Lamb of God on it. First track, Memento Mori, is a massive song. My ego wants to go against everybody and tell you why I'm right and you're wrong, but I put Ashes of the Wake as the second best thing about it.
Meant to dwell in darkness, shall never see the light of.
It really is the record where the sound and identity of the band solidifies. It really congeals on this record, and it sets the template in a very clear way for what Lamb of God will be and what a Lamb of God record will be like. And that template, in a lot of ways, is still in place. It's moved around, it's evolved, and we've built on it. But that's really, I think, where the identity of the band kind of came into form. And it's got some classic songs in it. It's also kind of when the band blew up. Like the first explosion of the band blowing up was this one. This is when we, went on Ozfest, and back when MTV was a thing, we were on MTV and Headbangers Ball and all that kind of stuff. We were, Hot Topic. We became, the mall metal band and all that shit. So there's one left, As a Palace is Burning. Because we're talking about fucking albums. We're not talking about songs. We're not talking about production. We're not talking about mix. We're talking about albums. It sounds bad. It's not sonically a good sounding album, although Josh did wonders with it when he did a remix and a remaster, and it sounds a lot better. But it sounds urgent, sort of like scarily desperate, and it sounds like it's about to fall apart or burst into flames at any minute, like the whole album does. It sounds like it's at that point of heat where it's just about to like get engulfed, you know what I mean? I don't know, it's a corny way to describe it. It just sounds like it's about to fall apart. And that kind of that urgency in the guitar tones and in Randy's, just the tone of Randy's voice and his delivery. I know how he recorded this record, and I know what was going on in his life when he recorded this record, and it's genuine. He's pissed off. Like, he's pissed off, and he's raging, and you can hear it in the track. And I think while Ashes of the Wake very much sort of defined what Lamb of God, like, it's where things like where the mold was set. This is us flailing around, trying all different kinds of stuff in that process, and it's very, very exciting. And it's the last punk rock Lamb of God. For me, what I hear is a reaction to New American Gospel. I was really unhappy with New American Gospel in the sense that it wasn't a realization of what I wanted it to sound like in my head. I got a lot more, I think, heavy-handed in terms of the songs that I was trying to develop creatively. I started writing a lot of lyrics. I wrote a lot of lyrics on As the Palace is Burned. I did a lot of arranging and structuring songs that I was working on. Not to say that I was the only one, but the stuff I was working on, I got my hands dug in a lot deeper. I think we all did. I think we all were really focused on leveling up. And I guess that's why I love this record, because I think gospel for me was an extension of Burn the Priest. There was the name change, but it almost sounds worse than the Burn the Priest record. And Burn the Priest had some, I'm slagging gospel. I don't know. There wasn't just that much growth for me as there was like Palaces. There was this massive stride in growth. It's an exciting, edgy record.